Hello, and thanks for coming. So today we're going to take a little, or this session, we're going to take a little step away from PCI, although it's kind of PCI adjacent. And normally I give this presentation with a co-speaker who is my digital forensics lead, and he is obviously not here, so you have to deal with me for this session. So today we're just going to go over the threat, kind of the attack overview, step through that, the considerations for investigations, and then key takeaways. So I'll take you through these. And again, Stu Deken would normally be here with me, but he actually got pulled away on business email compromise investigations. So he's off doing that. So just to set the numbers, because we always have to set the numbers right. Ransomware is bad, cybersecurity, bad guys do bad things, and it costs lots of money. So this is from Sophos. It's interesting that it costs about $2.6 million in ransom if they pay the ransom, but only about $1.6 if they don't pay the ransom. And this is on average across many companies. But I don't think the 1.6 includes all the costs associated with downtime, reputation impact, and all that. And then a number that I thought was actually low is 30% of ransomware includes exfiltration. Almost all of it, at the higher end anyway, is involving exfiltration of data. Some more numbers, and this is, I don't know if you can read that though. Oh yeah, that's all right. This is the one that makes me question my career choices sometimes when you look at the 2.9 billion in email compromise. So BEC, if you guys don't know, is business email compromise. It's what the FBI calls credential theft and email attacks. So we won't spend too much time on these. What I'm going to take you through is just talk through about what email compromise is and what they use it for. So it's a wide variety of uses. If any of you are security professionals, you probably know most of these. But the basic is business email compromise, trying to use it to gain access to data, to write fake invoices, delete or modify internal emails. The one that Stu is actually, he just sent me the timeline just about 20 minutes ago. The one he's working on now is business email compromise that led to the attackers sending out about 500 emails to the outside world and about 120 emails to the inside of the organization to try to expand their footprint. But it also involves, obviously, data theft, CEO fraud. Has anybody gotten the go buy me gift cards email? Those are always popular. Lanny, I can see. You can raise your hand. It's okay. All right. And then impersonation, just using the information. But ultimately, what they're after is money, right? This is all about money. This has nothing to do with old-style hackers who used to do this for fun, to prove they could do it. This is really just about money. So I'm going to take you through what we call the anatomy of a business email compromise attack or email. I also call this the threat actor decision tree. So this is from the perspective of the threat actor, not from the perspective of the victim. So typically, obviously, it's a phishing email that comes in. Typically, it says, click here, and they either take over or convince you to give up your credentials. So it's pretty common. But the first thing the bad guys do is they validate that they've got a good access. Does it work? Do you have multi-factor authentication active? Is there anything that's going to stop them from doing what they're doing? And then from there, they either sell the credentials, if they're a specialized organization, and all they do is collect these and then sell them, or they prepare their attack sequence. And if they break into my email and see all the spam I get, they get bored and wander off. If they get into a nice juicy client, MGM Grand, Caesars, a big client with a lot of money, they might sell that to another organization who will run the attack, or else they start preparing their attack sequence. Then they go to the next phase, which is reconnaissance. Again, the next person they hand off the credentials to validates, what do we have here? Who is it? Is it the CFO? Somebody in purchasing, the CEO? Low-level clerk? What can we do with this? And then again, they evaluate and do a decision tree and say, do we sell this information or we start our attack sequence? So to do the attack sequence, they actually, if it's a highly complex or mature organization, on the criminal side, mind you, right, they decide what's the best way to route this. Do we send it a fake invoice? Do we use it to launch other attacks? Do we do fake wiring instructions? If they're really selling it off, they could sell it to the ransomware side. But in this case, we're talking about email compromise. And so most of the time, it's either fake invoice or wiring instructions that they do. We've had some really interesting cases we've worked on where In fact, in one case, the impersonated one of the partners at RubinBrown, and so that was entertaining to do that analysis. So anyway, and then they launch their attack, right? So they execute, they get the money, mules pick up the money, they sweep it out of the accounts, and then they sit back and say, did we get caught? Did they figure this out? And if the answer is no, they didn't figure it out, well, then we do it again, but for more money, right? Because if they're a sucker once, they might be a sucker twice. But if they do get caught, then they bounce off and go to the next thing. And with these cyber criminals, you have to imagine they have a ticketing system, right? And they're just going to the next ticket in the queue. So this is, we did this attack, they caught us, all right, close that ticket, open up the next ticket, grab the next set of credentials, wash, rinse, repeat. So that's kind of the anatomy attack. Now, so what I want to take you through from here is really what do we do on the investigation side. So of course, the first thing you have to do is detect it. That kind of makes sense, right? We can't react to an incident unless we know it's happened. When I was a chief information security officer, we had a ticket in our ticketing system, help desk. They would call in, and we called it, I may have clicked on something, right? Because I don't know how many of you worked on the security operations side, but sometimes it's really hard to get people to admit they did something, like they clicked on it, they launched the attachment, they gave up their credentials because they're embarrassed. So we tried to do that. I may have clicked on something just to get that detection level up, even if there were false positives. It helped us out. So the 4 stages we go through are pretty typical for a digital forensics investigation, right? We want to preserve evidence. We want to contain the bad people. We go through an analysis and then recovery. So it's slightly different than a network-based attack, but a similar concept, similar structure. And so I'll take you through each of these. We'll talk about them and how we approach them, and then continue on. So on the preservation side, we recommend and we approach every investigation as if it's going to go to court. So our lead investigator happens to come out of law enforcement, so in his brain, everything is going to court. We've convinced him we're not going to criminal court anymore, but he's still convinced he's going to court to do the investigation. So on the evidence, the first thing we do is triage. What are we looking at? What was compromised? What was touched? I'm sure most of you know that some of the advanced email systems and cloud solutions in place now, you can tell which emails have been touched, when they logged in, how they logged in, depending on what level of licensing you have with Microsoft. You may not have that information available, but that's what we go through, is what information is available. Can we get the emails? Can we get the metadata? Can we get the logs? Because we want to know, when did the attack occur? What's the root cause? What did they touch? And then ideally any documentation that's available. So help desk tickets, anything that indicates the sequence of events or what happened, call logs, all that sort of thing. And then we're maintaining chain of custody as we go through the process. Again, we're assuming this is going to go to court, or we may hand it over to law enforcement, and we want there to be clear chain of evidence, chain of custody, and we don't want the integrity of the data we collect to be questioned. So there's just things we do on the preservation side. We emphasize this stage too because if you don't preserve the data fairly quickly, some of you may know cloud solutions, a lot of them will only hold your data for about 60 days and then it goes away, depending, again, license level with Google or Microsoft or whoever. And so it's important to get that data collected, and then we like to call it digitally or forensically preserved so that the integrity of the data is not in question. The next stage we move on to is containment, and you have to realize these things are kind of happening simultaneously or in parallel in some cases. Now, in the email compromise world, containment, we normally in forensics or in incident response, we'll talk about containment, limiting the access of the bad guys to what they're doing. In the email world, we're just trying to kick them out. But that means getting into the core of the email system, ending sessions, doing things like making sure passwords are changed. We still are begging people to implement multi-factor authentication, which I find bizarre that we're in 2024 and we're still asking people, please implement MFA. The SMS and texting, I think most people know there's lots of stories about how that can be overcome. Frankly, unless you're a whale target, like an MGM or a Caesars, most bad guys are not going to bother doing a bypass an SMS attack on you. But if you're a big enough organization, we still suggest use SMS as a last resort, but implement multi-factor authentication. And then close loopholes. There's some things like legacy authentication that's part of Office 365 that still allows you to use different mail apps to get to the data. And so that bypasses multi-factor authentication as well. You have to assume that if a bad guy threat actor is connected to your email and gained access, the first thing they do is download all of it, because that's what we would do, right? We want to pull all that data out, and even if you cut us off, from the bad guy perspective, we want all that data so we can sift through and see what kind of fraud and nonsense we can commit throughout the additional, through looking at it. And if the organization is sophisticated enough, they've got several teams that work on things, and the initial team is the compromise and activity team, like the wire fraud, but they've got another team who's going to do the fake invoices, or maybe fake one of your customers, or fake one of your suppliers. And they'll go through that process as well. So just keep that in mind. Closing those loopholes is very important. And then the analysis phase is when we get into what was in that email. As I just mentioned, we assume the bad guys accessed all the email and downloaded all of it. So there should be no credit cards in your email, right? Or at a PCI conference. But we look through that email. You've got to look through and say, what's in there? Is there personally identifiable information? Is there healthcare information? If you're in education, is there FERPA data, student data? So the first kind of we're doing simultaneously in the analysis phase is we're looking for what was the root cause? How did they get in? Where was the breach? Can we find the email possibly that they clicked on? A lot of times those get deleted by the bad guys as soon as they get access. They start covering their trails. But we're looking for all those things, all those logs that lead back to where did the access come from. And as Stu and I like to say, criminals are often very clever and sometimes not very smart. So the first time they log in to do that verification or validation that they've got access, they do it from their real IP address or from a non-VPN IP address, and you can start to trace them down. And then you'll see, I mean, we've seen it in investigations where they log in from wherever, Romania, and then 10 minutes later we see a VPN log in using the same set of credentials, and that's the bad guys saying, oh, we've got something good. Go into cover mode and try to cover our trail, but by then they've already logged the attack. So that's on the root cause analysis. We're looking for those things, and then on the risk assessment side, like I said, we're looking for, is there any sensitive data in there? If it's HR, is there personnel and employee data in there? And if so, does it have social security numbers? Does it have PII? Do we have to do a disclosure? Does it have customer data? A lot of states have Consumer Protection Acts now that require us to report over a certain threshold. Most of the time, none of that's the case, right? Because a lot of people don't keep that sensitive data in their email. But you have to look at it and do a risk assessment. This is where you get the lawyers involved too, and they say, based on what we're seeing and what's been reported, the lawyers will say how you're going to move forward, whether you're going to report it, who you're going to report it to, and how that's going to go. Pardon me. And then in recovery phase, this is where we start talking about just doing, are there things we picked up in the the analysis and the evidence collection that we could fix? So easy, low-hanging fruit. Did we identify vulnerabilities? So if the root cause says they came in through a technical means, can we close that? If it was just they sent me an email and I clicked on it and gave them my credentials, right, then we changed my password and give me a little education to maybe not do that again. But we start mitigating the findings, developing our reporting, and really looking through, is there anything we can do better? The organization that Stu is helping right now is actually going through the should we be doing more security awareness education and get the word out, because it's obviously, in this case, it's the second attack in 2 weeks, and so we're not sure if they're linked yet. But it's stuff like that we're looking at to say, all right, what's root cause? How do we mitigate this? Is it a people process, a technology process problem? And then make recommendations. In our case, make recommendations to management to clean the mess up and hopefully not have it happen again. And then the triage is really, when you first enter this process, triage is, can we do this on our own? So some organizations can. I've met some great organizations here at the conference so far that have really big teams and can probably do these responses on their own. We've met a couple that are a little bit smaller players. But do you need external assistance? And then in most cases, if you think there's been an actual, hate to say a breach, but if there's been an actual access where you think you may have to declare a breach, this is where you get your insurance companies involved. They assign you the breach coach and they lead you through the process. But the kind of considerations you have to think about are just what's the cost? Because outside help is obviously expensive, especially emergency outside help. What's the severity? So again, was this like, low-level clerk that turned over their credentials? Or was this the CFO or the head of HR or the CEO? Or in one case, Stu and I worked on, it was the executive assistant who also had access to the COO, CFO, and CEO's emails. She could see all of it, and she was the one who got compromised. She was very sweet, but it was a classic mistake, right? So we always tell people, I don't know if you guys, security folks out there, like you always, if you're going to call somebody, call the number you have on file. Don't call the number that's in the email that was used to compromise you. But she called that phone number instead of the known phone number. So again, sweet lady, but not very IT savvy. The other factors on there are peace of mind, regulatory concerns, and again, just do you have the internal capabilities to do this? We don't recommend having your help desk guy be the one to triage and do your evidence preservation unless they happen to be good at this stuff. You want to get some expert support, whether it's internal or external. So just things to think about. And then really don't be an easy target, right? So these are kind of preventative means that we talk about. Some of these are kind of general security, but frankly, they're just good considerations. Like review your access controls once in a while. Do your admin settings need to be where they're at? I don't think we have multi-factor on there again, but please, dear God, implement multi-factor authentication on everything you can. It really, really kills a lot of these attacks. And a lot of the bad guys, as I mentioned, are clever, but they're lazy. So if you have multi-factor authentication, they're going to bounce off. It's just not worth their time. Like I said, unless you're, what we call a whale target, you're a well-known wealthy attack target, or there's some reason to go after you that's either political or whatever. So just don't be an easy target. And these are just general things to help do that. The security awareness, is really important because if you've got a lot of people in your organization, not only can they be a human firewall, I've heard the term used, but just a human detectors, right? Somebody calls the help desk and says, this is weird, or forwards an email and says, this is weird. Is this an email okay? Because then the IT guys in the help desk can jump on it and say, that's odd. We just received 300 of these in the last 10 minutes, so we can do something about it. But if they don't know, they can't react. So, and then just some key takeaways. I think we all know cybercrime is getting worse. The business email compromise is difficult to detect unless it's self-reported, unless you've got some anomaly detection systems going, which are more common now. But the bad guys are logging in with valid credentials. So our standard alert systems are not going off. So it's just really hard to detect. And then BEC, your email compromise, can be used to both compromise internal people as well as external partners. Like I said, they will look at every invoice you've received or every invoice you've ever sent. And they will mask them, they will mimic them to the point of your signature lines in your email. If they can compromise your email and send it from your email, they will. The one that affected us came from RubinBrown.com with a 1 instead of an I. And so to the quick visual, they didn't even notice that the bad guy had taken over, set up a new email. And then, of course, prevention beats response 100% of the time. Just a reminder that, an ounce of prevention, right? Because Mandiant's really expensive to bring in at the last minute, or any of us, the other providers that do incident response. That's what I've got for today. Thank you very much. Contact info for both Stu and I are on there. If you have any questions, please track me down. I'll be at the conference the rest of today and tomorrow. Thank you.